Close your eyes. Let the world above fade into stillness, the hum of the present softening, the air cooling as if stone itself exhales. We are in Jerusalem. The city sleeps, but its stones never do. Each one holds a whisper, a fragment of prayer, a trace of footsteps long gone. Moonlight drifts along the domes, gliding over marble and dust, touching walls that have seen prophets, crusaders, kings, and pilgrims pass like waves. Beneath it all, the earth remembers more than it tells. It was here, on this plateau called the Temple Mount, that the story of the Lost Templar Treasure truly begins. Not in the clang of swords or the clash of kingdoms, but in silence, the kind that hums beneath the breath of eternity. For under these ancient stones lie chambers older than memory, tunnels where dust and shadow keep their vigil. Once, these halls were said to hold Solomon's temple, the resting place of the Ark of the Covenant itself. Later, they became the quarters of a small brotherhood of knights sworn to protect the pilgrims who came to worship here. They called themselves the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. To the world, they became the Knights Templar. Imagine the scene. Jerusalem in twilight, the muezzin's call fading into wind, the bells of distant churches echoing back in reply. Above ground, faith and prayer. Below, stone corridors breathing secrets. The Templars prayed where prophets had walked, slept above buried sanctuaries, and perhaps, just perhaps, began to wonder what rested below their feet. The contrast defines the tale to come. Light and devotion above, shadow and silence below. The city of God, and beneath it, the chambers of mystery. And in those hidden places, legend says, they found something powerful enough to change what they believed, and dangerous enough to hide forever. As you breathe with the rhythm of this ancient city, feel the weight of centuries settle quietly around you. The story of the Lost Templar Treasure begins not with gold, but with stone, and a whisper that still stirs beneath Jerusalem's sleeping heart. The year was 1119. The Crusades had already torn through the Holy Land, leaving behind a strange silence, not peace, but the heavy pause after great storms. The roads to Jerusalem were lined with broken stones and scattered bones, and yet pilgrims still came. Men and women from distant lands walked those roads with prayer on their lips and danger at their backs. For though the city had been won by Christian armies, the lands beyond its gates remained wild, haunted by raiders, thieves, and the ghosts of unburied wars. Among the thousands who arrived, 9 knights saw something more than a battlefield. They saw purpose. They were not princes, nor bishops, nor lords with vast estates. They were ordinary warriors, devout, disciplined, and driven by something far quieter than ambition. Their leader was a man named Hugues de Payan, a noble from Champagne in France. He and 8 companions swore an oath before God and man to protect pilgrims on the road to Jerusalem, to defend the paths between holy places, and to live in poverty and purity as soldiers of Christ. They called themselves Pauperes Commilitones Christi Templic Salomonici, the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. It was a humble beginning. 9 men, no wealth, no bannered army. They slept in shared quarters, rode borrowed horses, and wore plain cloaks with no emblem at all. Their weapons were worn, their armor mismatched. They had no treasury, no title, only a vow that bound them to something larger than themselves. Yet destiny, as always, finds the quiet ones. King Baldwin II of Jerusalem, seeing their devotion, granted them quarters on the Temple Mount itself. that sacred plateau where, centuries before, Solomon's temple was said to have stood. It was an odd gift for an order so small, a handful of knights given the most hallowed ground in Christendom as their dwelling. But perhaps Baldwin saw in them what others did not, the potential for a new kind of strength, born from discipline rather than numbers. Imagine their first nights there, the mount silent beneath a canopy of desert stars, ruins black against the sky, wind moving through broken colonnades where once the Ark of the Covenant was believed to rest. The men kneel in a circle, their swords laid before them, their heads bowed in prayer. Their voices rise softly, not to ask for glory or wealth, but for courage, for clarity, for protection of those who could not protect themselves, yet beneath their knees stone whispers. The Temple Mount had been built and rebuilt by empires, Babylonians, Persians, Romans, Byzantines, caliphs, crusaders. Each layer held remnants of the one before. Passages sealed by conquest, halls filled with rubble, chambers forgotten by the living. And it was said that even then, under the Crusader citadel that the Templars now called home, ancient tunnels still wound their way through the bedrock. At first, the knights' task was simple. They patrolled the roads, guarded caravans, escorted priests and merchants through deserts that still smoldered from war. They prayed, fasted, and trained. But the mount itself, its stones, its silences, called to them in ways that even prayer could not explain. Beneath their living quarters were stairways leading down to narrow spaces, remnants of older walls, echoing chambers where no torchlight reached. For years, the Templars lived there quietly. No one wrote of great battles or victories in those early days. They owned no fortresses yet, no armies, no bannered host. But something was happening in the depths of Jerusalem that would shape their future. Chroniclers later noted that while these knights seemed poor in coin, they grew rich in influence. Visitors spoke of strange excavations, of carts carrying debris from tunnels beneath the Temple Mount, of rumors that the knights were seeking relics, objects of divine power lost since the days of Solomon. Perhaps it was nothing more than maintenance, clearing space beneath their home. But the legends persisted, that the 9 knights, working in secret, uncovered hidden chambers and found relics sacred beyond imagination. Some spoke of scrolls written by Solomon himself. Others whispered of the Ark of the Covenant or fragments of it. Some said they found gold beyond measure. Others claimed what they found was not gold, but knowledge, maps, inscriptions, or texts revealing truths the church dared not speak. The beauty of this legend is that no one can disprove it. The Templars left no records of what they did beneath the Temple Mount during those first 9 years of silence. For nearly a decade they lived there, their order unrecognized by church or crown. And then suddenly they emerged from obscurity, no longer poor wanderers, but an organization with papal approval, royal support, and influence that spread like wildfire across Christendom. How does 9 men guarding pilgrims become an empire of faith and fortune in less than a generation? History gives us one answer. Divine favor. Legend gives us another. They found something beneath Jerusalem that changed everything. Picture that transformation. The same 9 knights who once slept on bare stone now ride under banners stitched with red crosses. Their white mantles gleam in the sun as they escort kings through the gates of Jerusalem. Pilgrims bow to them in awe. The Church blesses their mission. The name Templar becomes a symbol of purity and courage. But behind the light, a shadow grows, the whisper of something buried, something only they know. In the stillness of night, perhaps one of them remembers the silence beneath the Temple Mount, the carved stairs that led deeper than they dared go, the hollow echo of footsteps on ancient stone. Perhaps he wonders if they left something behind down there, or worse, if they brought something up that cannot be put back. The Templars were born in contradiction. They were knights who took vows of poverty, soldiers who prayed like monks, servants of God who wielded the sword without fear. But it was this very contradiction that gave them power. It made them untouchable, mysterious, divine, and dangerous all at once. And from that small circle of 9 men on a lonely mountaintop, an empire began to grow, an empire built not only on faith, but on secrets. As the years passed, their legend deepened. Some said they had unearthed ancient maps of the Holy Land, drawn by Solomon's own architects, revealing the sacred geometry of Jerusalem's foundations. Others claimed they found relics too holy to name, perhaps even the true fragments of the Ark itself. Whatever the truth, the Templars carried a new certainty in their eyes, a new fire in their prayers. They moved with the calm assurance of men who believed they had touched something eternal. The world above saw only the surface, knights in white mantles, banners fluttering, swords gleaming. But below that surface, in the vaults of Jerusalem, lay the secret heart of their order. What they found there would become the foundation of centuries of rumor, fear, and fascination. And as their power spread westward to France, England, Portugal, and Spain, that secret moved with them, sealed not in words or books, but in silence. The whisper beneath the Temple Mount had become a commandment. Protect what was found. Reveal nothing. Remember always. It began with 9 men, 1 city, and the soft pull of stone. The rest, the gold, the treasure, the curse, would come later. Years passed, and the world above Jerusalem moved on. Empires rose and fractured. Pilgrims came and went. But beneath the Temple Mount, the Templars kept their silent. They had built no churches of their own yet, no cathedrals to boast of their faith. Their temple was the earth itself, stone, dust, and memory, and beneath that ancient plateau they worked in shadows, their prayers mingling with the faint scrape of tools on rock. No chronicler recorded what they found, yet the signs remain in fragments of rumor, in the tremor of speculation that never fades. Some said they cleared ancient tunnels built in the days of Solomon, passages once used by priests to reach the Holy of Holies unseen. Others whispered that they uncovered vaults containing relics, sacred vessels of gold and bronze, scrolls written in languages older than Latin, and strange geometric markings etched deep into walls. The Templars spoke little. They left no confessions, no reports, no claims. But when they emerged years later, they were changed. The humility of 9 poor knights had given way to something steadier, a confidence that seemed born not of men, but of revelation. The Church soon blessed their order, and kings began to fear the quiet power behind their calm eyes. What had they discovered beneath the mount that filled them with such purpose? Some believed it was the Ark of the Covenant, the golden chest said to contain the tablets of Moses, hidden since the Babylonian conquest. Others claimed they found scrolls from Solomon's temple detailing divine wisdom or forbidden rituals. A few even spoke of ancient relics brought from Egypt, remnants of a knowledge far older than Christianity itself. And yet, perhaps their treasure was not an object at all. Perhaps it was knowledge, a truth unearthed in darkness, one that could not be spoken aloud without shaking the very foundations of faith. Imagine it, a tunnel carved from limestone, the air cool and still, a single torch flickering in the hands of a knight kneeling before a sealed archway. He touches the wall, feels the faint carved symbol beneath his fingers, and in that instant something ancient stirs within him. Awe, fear, devotion. Whatever they found, it bound them together. The Templars rose from those depths not merely as warriors, but as keepers of a secret, and that secret became their strength, their silence, and, in time, their curse. For as gold can corrupt kingdoms, knowledge can haunt souls. And in the darkness beneath Jerusalem, the Templars had touched both. When people hear the word treasure, their minds shimmer with images of gold, chalices encrusted with jewels, crowns resting on crimson velvet, chests overflowing with coins that glint like captured sunlight. But what the Templars found beneath the Temple Mount may not have glittered at all. Perhaps it was something weightless, a secret too luminous for the eyes, too dangerous for the world above. Over time, the stories divided like light through glass. Some say the knights uncovered relics of divine origin, the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Grail, or the menorah of Solomon's temple, hidden for centuries beneath the stones of Jerusalem. Others believed the treasure was not sacred metal, but sacred meaning. Ancient scrolls, maps, or blueprints describing how heaven was mirrored in the geometry of earth. The temple, after all, was said to have been built according to divine proportion. To learn its measurements was to touch the mind of God. Imagine what it meant to a handful of poor knights to kneel among those ruins, candles flickering over symbols carved long before their faith had a name. They would have felt both small and chosen, humble guardians of something vast. And perhaps, as they read or handled whatever they found, they understood that gold could be spent, but knowledge endures. That truth itself was the treasure worth defending. In this way, their vow of poverty became a disguise, their silence a form of protection. They were no longer merely soldiers of Christ. They had become keepers of a revelation, and their greatest weapon was secrecy. The church saw only their discipline, their courage, their obedience. Kings saw their efficiency, their incorruptible service. But within the order, among the few who had walked those tunnels, something unspoken bound them. They had seen what lay beneath. They had carried it into light and then hidden it again. And so their treasure was never buried in earth, but woven into their purpose. It became ritual, symbol, architecture, even numbers, the sacred encoded into stone and scripture alike. The power of such a secret is not in possession, but in preservation. Once something eternal is glimpsed, one must guard it from the unready. The Templars understood this. What they carried was not meant to enrich kingdoms, but to steady faith itself, to remind the faithful that beneath every temple of man lies the blueprint of heaven. The centuries would remember them as hoarders of gold, but those who listened closely heard a different whisper, that the true treasure of the temple was not what shines in the hand, but what awakens in the soul. And that kind of treasure, invisible, eternal, and forbidden, is the hardest of all to keep. When the Templars emerged from their long years beneath Jerusalem, they were no longer a handful of nameless knights. Something had changed in their bearing, a quiet confidence that seemed carved from the same stone they had slept upon. They carried no gold, yet they moved as if they possessed something the world could neither see nor measure. Whatever they had found, relic, truth, or revelation, it had given them a sense of purpose that radiated far beyond the Holy Land. In 1129, their order was officially recognized by the Church at the Council of Troyes. There their mission was blessed, their vows formalized, and their rule written down, the rule of the temple. It was a code of conduct so austere that it seemed forged from both discipline and devotion. The knights were to own nothing, sleep clothed, eat in silence, and obey without question. They were forbidden to hunt, to gamble, or to speak without cause. They rose before dawn to pray and trained under the blazing sun until their bodies became instruments of faith. Their white mantles, granted by papal approval, bore the red cross, a symbol of blood and salvation. To wear it was to carry both burden and honor. The world saw purity, sacrifice, and courage. What it did not see was how such unity made the order powerful beyond imagination. Within decades, the Templars had become the most respected and feared organization in Christendom. Kings sought their counsel. Popes sought their blessing. Pilgrims trusted them with their safety, and nobles trusted them with their gold. Their network of commanderies spread across Europe like a constellation, each one connected to the others through letters, seals, and an unbreakable code of faith. But the genius of the Templars was not only spiritual, it was practical. From their experience guarding travelers and transporting valuables across dangerous lands, they developed a system of financial trust unlike anything the world had ever seen. A nobleman in Paris could deposit his wealth at a Templar house and receive a letter of credit that could be exchanged for coin in Jerusalem. No need to carry heavy bags of silver across mountains and seas. The Templars' word was currency enough. In this way, they became the bankers of Christendom, not by greed, but by reliability. Their wealth grew not through conquest, but through faith in their integrity. And faith, as it always does, became power. Imagine the scene, a dusty road in southern France, a pilgrim arriving at a stone preceptory marked with the Red Cross. He kneels before a Templar clerk, signs his mark upon parchment, and leaves lighter, safer. Weeks later, beneath the same emblem in Jerusalem, another knight honors that note. Coin for paper, trust for distance. The system was simple, but its implications were vast. For the first time, money could move faster than armies, and loyalty could travel farther than kings. The Templars became not just warriors, but administrators, architects, and financiers. They built castles whose designs were ahead of their time. Fortresses like Crac des Chevaliers, Chateau Pèlerin, and Saft. Their walls were thick, their chambers filled with light, their chapels echoing with low, resonant hymns. They understood that stone could hold both sword and soul. But even in their grandeur, the Templars never flaunted wealth openly. Each knight owned nothing. The order owned everything. Theirs was a collective power bound by silence and rule. Every coin, every horse, every blade belonged to the temple. That unity made them invincible in purpose, but also invisible in intention. And what men cannot see, they begin to fear. To kings, the Templars were indispensable. They loaned armies, financed crusades, and stored royal treasuries. Yet dependence breeds resentment. Monarchs who owed them gold also owed them power. Philip of France, Henry of England, and Frederick of Germany each turned to the order for loans, knowing that behind those calm white mantles were ledgers that could unmake dynasties. Still, the Templars remained silent. Their obedience to the Pope placed them beyond royal authority. They paid no taxes, answered to no king, and kept their records in ciphered secrecy. No monarch could command them, and that independence, that sacred isolation, became both their armor and their eventual doom. At their height, the order numbered in the thousands. Knights, sergeants, chaplains, and servants formed a hierarchy as precise as any monastery. Their ceremonies, their initiation rites, their prayers, all were cloaked in mystery. Some chroniclers described candlelit halls where novices swore oaths of loyalty and secrecy, kissing a cross as their voices joined the ancient chorus. To outsiders, it was divine discipline. To enemies, it looked like hidden ritual, and from hidden ritual, rumor is born, whispers spread that the Templars worshipped strange idols, that their secret prayers were not to Christ, but to something older. None could prove such claims, but secrecy feeds suspicion. The order's greatest strength, silence, was slowly becoming its shadow. Still, their accomplishments could not be denied. They had turned the vow of poverty into a framework for prosperity, the rule of obedience into a system of order, and their silence into a currency of trust. In an age of chaos, the Templars were stability itself, a structure of stone, faith, and discipline standing amid the shifting tides of kingdoms. Yet power, even when pure in origin, does not remain untouched. As their influence spread, so too did the weight of envy. The Templars built estates, collected rents, managed vineyards, and operated mills. Their farms produced grain that fed cities. Their ships transported goods between ports. They became a state within a state, an empire of faith woven quietly through the fabric of Europe. And still, they remembered Jerusalem. In their chapels, every altar faced east, toward the city where it had all begun. Some say the original secret of the Temple Mount was encoded in those very foundations, the proportions of their churches, the layout of their commanderies, even the geometry of their seals mirrored the sacred design they once uncovered beneath Solomon's temple. Perhaps it was devotion. Perhaps it was obsession. Whatever it was, their gaze never left that holy plateau. The order's greatest mystery was not only what they found in Jerusalem, but what they carried from it, a hidden architecture of faith, mathematics, and meaning that they built into stone across the world. Imagine standing in a Templar chapel in France or Portugal. The air is cool, the lights soft and golden. The walls curve inward like a whisper. Every column seems placed with intention, every arch angled toward something unseen. You can almost hear the echo of distant prayers, voices speaking not to the God of the moment, but to the mystery beneath. That was the power the Templars forged, power in silence, not loud, not ostentatious, but steady and eternal. It was a power that built banks and fortresses, shaped kingdoms, and carried whispers from one end of Christendom to another. Yet such silence cannot last forever. In time, kings would question it. Popes would envy it. And the world that once revered the Red Cross would turn against it. But for now, in this moment of history, the Templars stand unshaken. The city of Jerusalem sleeps beneath the stars, and above its buried vaults, the legacy of 9 knights has become an empire. An empire not of gold or swords, but of trust, knowledge, and faith so deep it no longer needed to speak. Their silence was their power. Their power would become their peril. By the close of the 12th century, the Holy Land, the heart of the Templars' calling, was bleeding away. The deserts that had once echoed with hymns and marching banners were now haunted by wind and silence. Castles that had gleamed like crowns along the horizon stood scarred, their stones scorched, their wells filled with sand. The Templars had fought with courage beyond measure, but courage alone cannot halt time, nor can faith rebuild what ambition has undone. The fall began at Hattin in the year 1187. Under a sky like molten brass, the Christian armies met Saladin, Sultan of Egypt and Syria. The Templars rode at the vanguard, white cloaks glowing like ghostly fire against the heat-bent horizon. For 2 days they held their ground, parched and surrounded. Then came the desert wind, dry, merciless, heavy with smoke. When the dust cleared, the true cross had been captured, the Crusader army annihilated, and the dream of Christendom's empire in the east shattered like glass. Jerusalem fell soon after. Imagine that moment. The city's gates creaked open to Saladin's troops. Bells fell silent. Banners were lowered. Relics hidden or taken. The golden dome of the rock caught the sun as if to remind all who looked that faith can change hands as swiftly as a sword. For nearly a century, the holy city had been the jewel of Christian devotion. Now its light dimmed, not extinguished, but carried westward in memory and grief. The Templars retreated to their coastal strongholds, Acre, Tyre, Tortosa, and Chateau Pèlerin. From there, they continued their vigil. They fortified, rebuilt, prayed, and waited for redemption. For them, Jerusalem was more than land. It was an idea, a covenant, a promise between heaven and earth. They believed that losing it was not defeat, but a test of endurance. Their castles were cathedrals of stone and will. At Crac des Chevaliers, towers rose like cliffs, their shadows stretching over the Syrian hills. In its halls, knights ate in silence beneath ribbed arches where sunlight spilled through narrow slits. At night, the wind carried the scent of oil, salt, and prayer. In Acre, the sea pounded the fortress walls, waves striking like war drums. Inside, chapels glowed with candles, and armor hung like mirrors catching the light. The Templars were masters of both faith and fortification. Their architecture reflected their souls, austere, precise, unyielding. Each fortress stood like a psalm carved into the earth, built not for comfort, but for endurance. They knew the storms would come again. They built for siege, not triumph. And the storms did come. In 1291, more than a century after Hattin, Acre, the last bastion of Crusader rule, was surrounded. The Mamluks of Egypt advanced with unstoppable force. Siege engines hurled stones the size of men, the air filled with arrows and ash. Inside, the Templars and their allies stood shoulder to shoulder, holding the walls for as long as faith could bear weight. Imagine dawn over the harbor, ships burning, towers collapsing, the cries of men echoing over the water. The Templar banner, red cross on white, fluttered in the smoke until the very last moment. When the walls fell, they did not flee. They retreated to their inner fortress by the sea and fought until fire met stone. When the flames finally died, only ruins remained. Acre was gone. Jerusalem had long been lost. The Holy Land was no longer holy ground for them. The survivors fled to Cyprus, carrying with them what little they could: relics, documents, memories, and silence. The Templar dream of guarding pilgrims had ended, but their order endured. In Europe, their estates still thrived, their treasuries still overflowed, yet something in them had changed. Their hearts had been left among the ashes of Acre, and without a battlefield to define them, their purpose began to blur. The paradox that had always defined the Templars, monks and warriors, poor men and bankers, saints and strategists, now tilted toward imbalance. They were rich without crusades, powerful without a clear mission, and the world began to ask what an army without a war should do. Kings borrowed from them and envied them. The church praised them publicly, but grew uneasy in private. The people, once awed by their courage, now whispered that the knights had grown proud, even arrogant. Some called them lords in white cloaks rather than servants of Christ. Others hinted at darker things, that they had found secrets in Jerusalem too great for mortal eyes, and that heaven itself had turned against them. In truth, the Templars were adrift. They continued to train, to pray, to govern their far-flung estates, but the soul of the order, the sacred purpose that had once burned at its core, was fading. Their castles still stood, their coffers still filled, but their calling had no home. Without Jerusalem, the Templars were like guardians of a gate that no longer existed. Yet they refused to dissolve. To abandon their vows would be to abandon meaning itself. And so they waited for another crusade, another cause, another dawn that never came. They believed the Holy Land could still be regained. But the age of crusades was ending, replaced by politics, commerce, and the restless hunger of kings. Still, in their chapels, the Templars prayed toward the east. Their altars, their seals, even the geometry of their churches still pointed to the Temple Mount, the place where it had all begun. Beneath every vow and battle, that buried memory endured. The whisper beneath the stones of Jerusalem still lived within them, and perhaps that was the true tragedy, that they could never return. The treasure, whether physical or spiritual, remained lost to the ages. The secret they had carried from beneath the Temple Mount now belonged only to legend, and legends, when denied their land, become ghosts. So the Templars became ghosts of glory, echoes of an age when faith wore armor and kings knelt before monks. They walked the corridors of Europe's castles like reminders of a dream that had burned too brightly to last. Their eyes still turned eastward, but the path was gone. The sea and the centuries had swallowed it whole. The fall of the Holy Land was not just the loss of cities or fortresses, it was the unraveling of identity. The Templars had been warriors of God, guardians of pilgrims, protectors of Jerusalem. Without those things, they were left only with memory. And memory, when bound to faith, can become a weight heavier than stone. Yet in that loss was the seed of their final mystery. For the question that began beneath the Temple Mount, what did they find, would soon twist into a darker one. What did they hide? The Holy Land was gone, but the Templars' legend was only beginning to rise. The end of the Templars did not come from battlefields or deserts. It came from paper, politics, and fear. And it began on a day the world would never forget. Friday, October 13th, 1307. In France, dawn broke cold and silent. Across the kingdom, in villages and castle alike, the red cross of the temple still commanded respect. The knights were trusted by peasants, honored by nobles, and feared by kings. Their halls housed pilgrims, stored treasures, and echoed with prayer. Yet on that morning, before the sun had fully risen, the order was marked for destruction. The architect of their downfall was King Philip IV of France, called Philip the Fair for his face, not his heart. His treasury was empty, drained by wars and extravagant courts. Much of his debt was owed to the Templars, whose discipline and wealth had become a quiet humiliation to him. He owed them gold. He owed them power. And so he decided to repay both with betrayal. At his command, sealed orders were sent to every corner of France. They were not to be opened until the appointed dawn. When the moment came, the king's soldiers broke the seals and read their orders aloud. Arrest all members of the Order of the Temple and seize all their property, immediately and without warning. Imagine the scene. Templar preceptories across France, quiet stone halls, prayer echoing in dawn's cold air, doors shatter under the weight of soldiers, boots thunder down corridors, knights are dragged from their cots, half-armored, bewildered, demanding to know their crime. The answer: heresy, idolatry, blasphemy. The accusations were monstrous. The Templars were said to deny Christ, to worship strange idols, to kiss each other's feet, to spit on the cross, to engage in unspeakable rituals behind closed doors. To the fearful and envious, such stories made sense. After all, the Templars were secretive. They prayed in silence. They answered only to the Pope. Their wealth was hidden, their initiation rites unknown. In a world hungry for suspicion, secrecy itself becomes guilt. Under torture, many confessed. Pain bends truth until it breaks. Some admitted to spitting on the cross, a test of obedience, they claimed. Others spoke of idols, of skulls, of rituals misunderstood by outsiders. Most simply cried out whatever would end the suffering. The king had his proof, the church had its scandal, and the world had its spectacle. The Grand Master himself, Jacques de Molay, was imprisoned in Paris. Once a leader of armies, he was now a gray-haired captive, shackled in darkness. For years he endured interrogations and torment. Yet when the time came to speak, he denied the charges. He declared the order innocent, victims, not villains. But the machinery of accusation cannot be stopped once set in motion. The king demanded their property, the church demanded confession, and the people demanded fire. The Pope, Clement V, found himself cornered. The Templars answered to him, yet he owed his crown to Philip's influence. To defend them was to defy a king. To condemn them was to stain the church forever. In the end, politics triumphed over truth. In 1312, by papal decree, the Order of the Temple was dissolved. But dissolution was not enough. There must be an ending, a fire bright enough to erase what words could not. And so, on a cold March evening in 1314, two figures were led to a small island in the Rive Seine, Jacques de Molay and Geoffroy de Charnay. Loyal to the end, the pyres were prepared, the crowd gathered, the king's men waiting. Bound to the stake, Molay raised his voice. Chroniclers would later swear that his final words rang above the crackle of flame. God knows who is wrong and who has sinned. Soon, those who have condemned us shall face his judgment. Within a year, both Philip IV and Pope Clement were dead. The flames consumed the flesh of the order, but not its name. The Templars died in the river light of Paris, yet their story survived, smoldering in rumor, rekindled by guilt, and whispered through the centuries. And so the legend began anew. that the treasure of the temple had not perished, that it had been hidden before the arrests, carried away by night, protected by men who vanished like mist. What the king burned was only the surface. What the fire could not touch, the silence, the secret, the treasure, endured. The fire on the Seine should have been the end. The white mantles had turned to ash, the Grand Master's voice silenced by smoke, and the order itself dissolved by decree. Yet some stories refuse to die. They smolder quietly in the dark, waiting for breath to find them again. The legend of the Lost Templar Treasure was one such ember. They say that, on the night before the arrests, before King Philip's soldiers shattered the doors of their commanderies, a caravan of wagons slipped out of Paris. Cloaked in silence, guarded by a handful of knights, it rolled west through mist and darkness, bound for the coast. The wagons were said to carry the temple's greatest secret, not gold alone, but relics, scrolls, and the knowledge the order had preserved for 2 centuries. Some claim the convoy reached La Rochelle, the Templars' fortress port on the Atlantic. There, ships waited, silent outlines, against the tide. Before dawn, the vessels vanished into the fog, sailing toward waters unknown. Others swear the treasure never left France at all, that it was hidden in the labyrinth beneath Paris, buried in vaults whose entrances were sealed forever. Still others believe the wagons went east, retracing the sacred roads to Jerusalem, returning what once had been taken. Every theory finds a believer, and every believer finds a shadow of proof. In the ruins of commanderies across Europe, tunnels lead nowhere. Sealed doors echo when struck. In one chamber, a stone carved with a cross points north. In another, a fresco depicts ships sailing under moonlight. Each clue feeds the myth, and the myth, in turn, keeps the memory alive. But perhaps the truth is simpler and far greater. Perhaps the Templars' real treasure was never a hoard of metal, but a network of faith and trust that no king could seize. Their letters of credit, their sealed accounts, their coded ledgers, these were wealth beyond gold, wealth that could survive in silence. When the order fell, its knowledge did not burn. It scattered, it adapted, it survived. Imagine the last of the Templars standing on the pier at La Rochelle, watching their ships fade into the morning mist. They do not look back. They know what they carry cannot be destroyed, for it is already within them, etched into discipline, encrypted into ritual, preserved in devotion. The wagons are gone. The ships are gone. The order is gone. But the mystery remains, weightless, endless, indestructible. The world above called it treasure. The Templars called it truth. Centuries passed, and kingdoms rose where empires had fallen. The Crusades became legend, and the Templars, ghosts of a vanished order, were remembered in equal parts awe and suspicion. Yet beneath Jerusalem, the silence they once kept still breathes. Even now, the stones whisper the same unbroken story, waiting for those patient enough to listen. Archaeologists have long searched the Temple Mount for traces of the Templars' presence. Some discoveries are simple: fragments of pottery, worn steps descending into shadow, corridors sealed by centuries of dust. Others hint at deeper mysteries: walls built in patterns unseen elsewhere, niches aligned with strange precision, tunnels that echo as though they lead farther than maps allow. Beneath the great platform of the Dome of the Rock, legends say there lies a void, a hidden chamber that has never been fully explored. Some believe the Templars found that chamber first, and that what they carried out of it, not gold, but something written, something measured, something remembered, was the knowledge that built their empire in Europe, the geometry of their churches, the symmetry of their fortresses, even the seal that bore two knights on one horse, all seemed to echo an ancient pattern, a balance of duality they may have learned from the Mount itself. In the modern world, that echo refuses to fade. Historians search archives for missing ledgers. Freemasons trace their rituals to Templar roots. Theories spiral, from Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, whose carvings mirror Solomon's pillars, to the catacombs beneath Rennes-le-Château, where whispers of hidden manuscripts persist. Even in distant Portugal, the Order of Christ, founded after the Templars' fall, carried their symbol, their silence, and their vision forward, centuries into exploration, conquest, and the birth of a new world. Yet for all the legends, no definitive treasure has ever been found. Excavations under Jerusalem reveal nothing but more questions, as if the earth itself guards their secret. Perhaps the treasure was never meant to be found at all. Perhaps the Templars understood that mystery itself is a form of power, a light that guides without revealing its source. Stand today at dawn before the Temple Mount. The air still hums faintly with unseen memory. Pilgrims whisper prayers in 100 tongues. The golden dome catches the first light of morning, and beneath it, far beneath it, sleeps the same silence the Templars once walked through. And in that silence, you might almost hear it. The faint rhythm of footsteps, the sound of iron scraping stone, the whisper of a vow that has never been broken. Night returns to Jerusalem, the streets empty, the air cools, and the city folds itself back into silence. Lanterns flicker in windows, then fade. Somewhere above, the moon drifts like a slow-moving coin, its light silvering the domes and walls that have watched over millennia of prayer. Beneath those stones, the earth still holds its breath. The story of the Lost Templar Treasure does not end with discovery. It ends, as all true mysteries do, with reflection. For what lies buried may never have been gold or relic at all, but the unspoken link between faith and curiosity, between the seen and the unseen. The Templars were born from that tension, monks who fought, warriors who prayed, seekers who guarded what they could never fully name. Every century adds another layer of dust, another veil of interpretation. Scholars debate, pilgrims dream, storytellers weave their own versions of the secret. Yet through all of it, one truth remains constant: the power of the unknown. The Templars understood it, feared it, and served it. In their silence was not absence, but reverence, the awareness that certain truths can only be held, never spoken. Imagine standing once more upon the Temple Mount at midnight. The city sleeps. Wind moves through the olive trees like the breath of time itself. Beneath your feet, somewhere deep below, are corridors untouched for 1,000 years. You picture torches flickering on stone, the scrape of armor, a whispered prayer in Latin, fading into the dark. The scene is gone, yet the feeling lingers, a stillness so complete that even thought must bow before it. Perhaps the real vault was never under the temple at all. Perhaps it lies within the human heart, that restless chamber where belief and wonder meet. The Templars, in their search, were mirrors of us, forever digging, forever guarding, forever unsure whether what they sought was divine or merely a reflection of their own longing. In that sense, the treasure remains eternal. It survives not in gold coins or jeweled relics, but in the stories that refuse to die, each telling, yours, mine, those whispered through centuries, opens the vault again, lets a little light spill into the dark, and reminds us that mystery itself is sacred. So now, let the city rest. Let the centuries close like a great book gently shutting. The moon drifts higher, the stones cool, and the whisper beneath the Temple Mount sinks back into silence. Somewhere below, in a chamber no one has yet found, a torch still burns in imagination. Steady, patient, eternal. And as you drift into sleep, you carry it with you. The treasure is not gone. It has simply changed its keeper.